we'll be in Ruth chapter 3. Ruth chapter 3. I was looking forward to wrapping up the book of Ruth next Sunday night, and then I remembered, nope, we don't have church service next Sunday night with Father's Day and all, but hopefully 2 weeks from now. And so planning on going through the whole chapter of Ruth 3 tonight. Feel free to turn there. Enjoying our study through the book of Ruth. Some good stuff there. I think some practical things on choices. Now, I usually feel rather convicted when we talk about choices because if you're anything like me, you could always make better choices, and it's something that we certainly do every single day. And I'll be honest, as we look at Ruth 3, we're going to do some study on a tough choice, choosing to wait. Choosing to wait on God. So, Brother Glenn's got some pictures to put up on what I'm calling patience testers. When it's the hardest to wait, feel free to weigh in on which you think is the hardest to wait. Go ahead, Brother Glenn, with that first picture. Anybody driving in the morning, stop signs, forget it. Now, are you the type that a four-way stop that you're going as fast as you can, or are you nice and waving the other person on? Okay, yeah, you're just technical and correct and all of that. I'm not surprised. Well, I think the next one's just a stoplight, just to kind of test our patience, even seeing some of those things. What do you think? Do we need a stoplight down here at the end of Crottlestown? I feel like normally the times when I'm making a left, I wait sometimes a couple minutes. That's probably about how long we'd wait at a light, but I'm not always the most patient there. I am the one that'll pull out into the middle lane sometimes. I'm getting better about that one. Go on to the next one, and just this image might stress you out, I warn you. But stuck in traffic. Now, which is worse? Which is worse? Stuck in a bunch of traffic, or stuck behind one car and that car is doing like 5 or 10 below the speed limit? Yeah, I feel like the one car is sometimes more of a patience tester. Now, in the tech world, the next one really, again, fair warning, it might just make you cringe there. You can go ahead and put that one up. But that one, as well as the next one is more where you're specifically not waiting on the computer to wake up, but waiting for something to download. I promise you, I don't know how it works, but technology can smell fear. So the more, they used to say the watched pot on the stove never boils, watched pot never boils. I think that's true, but watched technology. I don't know what it is, but copier machines at a church on a Sunday morning, they don't like to work. It drives me nuts. Well, we'll look at two more. The next one, again, you have to hear the sound. So just a constant noise, whether that is constantly being asked questions or constantly having water drip. Maybe that one's even worse than a stop sign. And then last, but certainly not least, just put up a picture of a mirror. Anybody willing to admit it, that you test your own patience? We won't talk about other people, whether they test your patience or not, but waiting can be difficult. It can be a tough choice to be patient and wait, but it's always worth it to wait on God's best. Ruth is going to have to do some waiting, and she has been, but she is able to actively wait, and between this chapter and the next, we'll see her really experience God's best, not miss out on it. But even for us, and we'll talk about it, but waiting is often active. It reminds me of a car sitting at a stop sign or at a red light. That engine's still running unless you have one of these fancy cars, and then the thing turns off. It confuses me. Hybrid or whatever, it turns off, idles down real low, and then you let your foot off the brake and it restarts the engine. I don't know how we're not seeing more and more starters go out of these cars. I'm not smart enough for that. But the engine's still running, even when the car's not moving. Maybe you got a turn signal clicking away. A lot's going on so that car is ready to go when the time comes, but it waits to move. And that's us a lot of times. We're developing that relationship with God. We're investing in other people, even while we're waiting on what God is going to do in a certain situation. So it's that active waiting, and we'll see that a little more as we go. Well, first of all, in Ruth chapter 3, we'll look at verse 1 with this idea that we can choose to have peace even while we wait. We can choose to have peace even while we wait. Would you agree that that is sometimes something that requires a deliberate choice? Any of you just really good, you're patient, and you're willing for us to test that after the service, we can just come and annoy you and see how good you are at waiting or being annoyed, all of that. Anybody like, no, don't do that to me. I will fight back anyway. I think a couple of people there. I don't know. Well, Ruth 3, we'll pick up in verse 1. It says, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? So we can see Ruth has been gleaning, just kind of surviving. Now Boaz has been a blessing to her up to this point. Maybe a hint or two of the budding romance, maybe not. We could debate that. It's about to very much head in that direction. But again, Boaz has seen her character, the way she treats her mother-in-law, the way she has placed her faith in God, the way she's a hard worker, and that's gotten Boaz's attention, and he's rewarded that. But still, she's kind of in a, okay, I followed Naomi back. Naomi's describing herself as bitter, and we're just kind of making it day to day with food. I think she's just trying to see what's coming. Naomi really starts to take a step in the right direction. I think Naomi had just been bitter, willing to just try to survive, and now she's saying, hey, I think Boaz might be the key here. I think Boaz might be someone God has brought here for Ruth and really for the family, and seeking even better than just surviving, seeking to have that rest, that peace, and we can have that even while we wait. When we think people are in charge, there's fear. But when we choose to trust that God's in charge, there's peace. Can't we get all, to just put it simply, can't we get all in a tizzy, get all upset about what this politician's doing or what that politician's doing or what did Elon Musk say lately or, what was Donald Trump, President Trump's response and, got a couple laughs. Yeah, we can relate to that and a couple more people we could say, what about this and what about that? Maybe for you it's more, every day it's a boss or it's this or that. We can lose every bit of rest and peace possible when we view it as these people are in charge. Naomi, humanly speaking, didn't have a lot to hope for, right? Maybe this whole romance thing could work out, the kinsman redeemer, but I think Naomi is finally responding in faith of, hey, ultimately God's in charge, so there's something better than just surviving available for her and for Ruth. And when we'll choose to rest in the fact that, yeah, God has allowed those people to have some authority, but as it says in the Bible, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He turneth it whithersoever he will. As a river of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. God can turn the heart of a king. He can turn the heart of a president, a boss, an employer, anything. We can rest in the fact that God's ultimately in charge. Naomi wanted God's plan for Ruth, and that would include rest, that would include peace, that would include more than just today. But would you agree? Enjoying that takes a step of faith. We'll talk about it a lot. They could have rushed ahead of God's plan in a big way here, right? I think Naomi and her husband had rushed ahead of God's plan years before in leaving Bethlehem and going to Moab. And we could probably spend a while just thinking about what could Naomi and Ruth have done here that would have rushed ahead of God's plan. I mean, everybody at the end, it's not the last words of the book of Ruth, but it could be, and everyone lived happily ever after. I mean, that would fit, right? Some of you know what's coming. Again, God had an amazing plan. They needed to choose to take a step of faith day by day, to wait, to have that peace, to enjoy what God had. One commentary points out that there were other men who would have gladly married Ruth. I think she's a beautiful woman, she's godly, she's a hard worker, but none of them could have redeemed her. Now, we're talking about redemption financially, redemption of the family name. Only a relative could have redeemed her. But really, in an eternal sense, for us, there are a lot of religions that would gladly welcome you. Wouldn't you agree? Some of them even come knock on your door and have all sorts of things. Usually if you see someone dressed about like I'm dressed right now, maybe not the jacket, but, stay away from them. They've got some false religious ideas that don't fit with the Bible. But there are a lot of religions that would gladly welcome you, but only one Savior who can offer you salvation. And there are a lot of easier lifestyles than following Jesus, but only following Jesus can impact eternity and offer true peace, joy, and satisfaction. We can choose peace even while we wait. Ruth and Naomi could have chosen their own way, They could have chosen to run ahead. Even this process takes a little bit of time. We really, at the end of chapter 3, we're kind of left on a cliffhanger. Again, I think you know Boaz and Ruth are going to end up getting married. But she didn't know that. She had to wait patiently and actively doing her part. And I think she got to experience some of that peace that we can too. Well, next, we often need to work even while we choose to wait. Talked about it some, but we often need to work even while we choose to wait. Notice the plan here, and a lot of this made more sense in that culture, but it's a beautiful picture. Verse 2, and now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast. So, hey, haven't you been working with one of our kinsmen? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee. Get all dressed up there, and get thee down to the floor. But make not thyself known unto the man, until he shall have done eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. Again, if you're anything like me, maybe you've pictured exactly what that looked like, Ruth laying there, and here comes Boaz laying here, and, all appropriate, but it still sounds a little weird. Made sense in the culture back then. Anybody glad that this is not the way to propose ever today? Again, just sounds a little bit weird. She's laying at his feet. That's better than the biblical meaning of covering your feet, if you're with that. But verse 4 says, and it shall be when he lieth down, thou shalt mark the place. Oh, we'll skip ahead to verse 5. And she said unto her, all that thou sayest unto me, I will do. By the way, I don't know that this was the custom in Moab. I doubt that it was. Ruth is going to basically propose marriage, but to Boaz as her kinsman redeemer. Kinsman redeemer is in Levitical law. It's a Jewish thing. I doubt that this made sense to a Moabitess named Ruth. And yet she was willing to really submit to God by submitting to Naomi, submit to the plan there. Verse 6, and she went down unto the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and at the end of the harvest there, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay her down. Again, even the uncovering feet. I imagine some of you ladies have met a gentleman or two in your life that have some pretty stinky feet. Again, this is probably not the most appealing process in that regard in the short term. And yet I commend Ruth for being willing to do that, being willing to do her part, to work the process. By the way, does God ever have us go through some things that don't make any more sense than this? Yeah. Made sense before long. And it will for us as well. If we'll patiently wait, do the next right thing, follow God there. I've heard it said that there are 3 types of people. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what's happening. Now, I'll give it to Ruth for being in that first category, doing her part to make things happen. We need to be willing to submit to God's plan. Ruth submitted to this plan, even though I'm sure it sounded strange. And Ruth, she has an important message. It's basically proposing marriage, asking him to be her kinsman redeemer. And I love the wisdom and grace that she uses to conduct herself as she communicates that message. It's the right thing said in the right way. She did the right thing the right way, and the rest will be up to Boaz, ultimately up to God. But do you picture it? She's committed to this plan. And I never really thought this, but we'll see it later on in the chapter and even on into the next. When she goes and asks Boaz, a near kinsman of her ex-husband, or former husband who's died, will you be my kinsman redeemer? She's basically submitting herself to the plan of soon having a kinsman redeemer. She's basically legally bound. Boaz is going to say, hey, there's a nearer kinsman, and if that guy said, yeah, I want to marry Ruth, she's stuck. And again, this guy chooses not to marry Ruth, so I don't really think a whole lot of that other guy. I mean, it doesn't seem to have good taste in women. Ruth's great, but she's stuck with the process at this point. But do you see how for a moment, there's not even a moment where she's really stuck. She's right where she belongs. The pieces are falling together. But if Boaz says, nah, he's not obligated. Boaz could just say, nah, she's on to the next guy. Boaz says, yeah, I'm up for it. I'd love to marry you, basically. But this other guy we got to see. And we'll see that in Ruth 4 where he says no, but we should all be willing to be in a position where it's up to God, where we're kind of in trouble unless God comes through. That doesn't mean we're reckless, but that does mean we're living lives of faith. Really, the results are always up to God, and Ruth was never in any danger of anything happening except for what God had. 1 Corinthians 3:6, the Apostle Paul says, I've planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. We're going to see God give the increase to Ruth. God gave the increase to Paul and Apollos in the church there in Corinth, and on and on. But unfortunately, it's easy to have about as much patience as the little boy who was standing at the end of an escalator in a store. The sales lady came by and said, son, are you lost? No, ma'am. I'm waiting on my chewing gum to come back. Instead of waiting for things that are often no better than that, let's be busy following God's plan, trusting Him for the results, and waiting on the best that He wants to bring out of it. Sorry, that was just gross. I don't need to chew gum for a day or two after that. I don't know. Anyway, as we continue on, choosing to wait, it often opens the door for God to work with our involvement, but without our interference. Choosing to wait on God often opens the door for God to work with our involvement, but without our interference. Verse 8, and it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid. Again, picture the scene. You wake up and someone's at your feet. That's going to be a little scary. But think about it. Do you know why he's laying there? Do you know why Boaz isn't sleeping in his probably very nice home? He is guarding the harvest. They've got it probably on the top of a hill where there's a nice breeze so they can toss up the wheat and have the chaff get blown away. So he's up on a hill, very visible. His harvest is probably very visible, and he is laying there to guard it. So any noise might set him off. Anybody else around, his first thought has got to be robber. I mean, mine would be in that situation. He's guarding the harvest. The only thing between thieves and stealing the harvest is him. So it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Again, this guy's got a lot of reasons to be wide awake and a little freaked out at this point. Verse 9, and he said, who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid. Again, basically that's the modern day equivalent of getting down on one knee and proposing. That's what this means in this context, with the being, spread thy skirt, being the kinsman redeemer. Again, taking ownership of that, not of Ruth, but of that process. For thou art a near kinsman. And he said, blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than in the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. From that, I and many others do kind of figure Boaz is probably a little older than Ruth. Perfectly fine. But at the same time, Ruth probably could have gone after a younger guy, potentially a wealthier guy. Now, Boaz is probably wealthy. He owns the fields, all of that. But again, I think Boaz is recognizing this is a young lady who's following God's leading, doing what is God's leading here. Kind of a beautiful picture in Ezekiel 16:8 of this same thing, of the idea of spreading the skirt over. God talking here. It says, now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over thee and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord God, and thou becamest mine. Just that beautiful picture of redemption is kind of sprinkled throughout Ruth. Boaz is able to be the kinsman redeemer and make Ruth a part of his family, marry Ruth, help her financially, all of that, give her a hope and a future for this life. But God gives us that hope and a future. We've come to Him for salvation. He's redeemed us. He's bought us back. Sin doesn't own us anymore. A lot of people think that Christianity, it's almost slavery, it's difficult, it's such a hard life. If only I could throw off the shackles of all of that. And people that try to become completely enslaved to sin. I would much rather serve Jesus than to serve sin. And again, just those beautiful pictures of being bought back. Ruth from her widowhood and all of that, but God buying us back to Himself. Verse 11, continuing on, Boaz says, and now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest. Yes, I'd love to marry you. For all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. By the way, what a good reason to consider marrying someone. That's exciting. Verse 12, and now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. There's a closer relative. It's his option first there to marry you. Verse 13, tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. So relax, get this all taken care of. To say that Ruth probably didn't sleep a wink? Yeah, I don't even know if she knows this other guy. She might have met him. She's been in Israel a little bit now. But, to Boaz, he's just trying to go through the right process that Ruth has submitted herself to. But I imagine Ruth's like, wait, no. I chose you. I proposed to you. Like, you be my, And there are times where following God's plan, patiently waiting, seems to almost drop us right where we don't belong. And those are times we're going to want to quit. I don't know, but do you think Ruth might have wanted to run away and say, nope, I take it back. I'm good. Nope, I don't need a kinsman redeemer. I'll go find some other guy. I'll go work harder. I can glean. We're doing okay. And there'll be times where we have that choice to take a step of faith, to wait patiently, to stay in the process, even though it looks like it's falling apart. But if God's directed us, those are times to stay in. And those are times where often the biggest, best stuff's coming. Again, spoiler alert, I think you probably read through Ruth and all of that. But again, the other guy's going to pass. Boaz is going to be able to marry Ruth. And it's all going to work out exactly how God had planned. Choosing to wait, it really does often open the door for God to work with our involvement, but without our interference. If Ruth had interfered, it wouldn't have worked out well. Let me just say one more thing real quick before we move on just a little bit. But I'll often pray for my daughters and for my nephews, just kiddos there, and all that they that they will only date, and again, 40, 50 years when they date, but maybe a little sooner than that. But, and Addison, yes, I'm kidding when I say that. She gets very nervous. Anyway, but that they would only date and marry the person that God has for them. And I love how we see Ruth being the person God wants her to be, and that leading her to the relationship God wants her to have. And that applies to romantic relationships and marriage, but it also applies to friendship. It also applies to work. It also applies to anything. Let's be the right person, and that will open the right doors. It is kind of fun to see Ruth's proposal. Do we agree that we're glad that marriage proposals are a little different now? I'm not even sure if some of you all know where Jen and I got engaged, so I figured I'd talk about that. Yeah, it was at Caledonia. So, is that waterfall there anymore? Like right near the furnace as you drive in? I don't even know. Well, you told me that it wasn't there anymore, right? Okay, so maybe the waterfall's back. Yeah, I proposed in December, though, so I'm down on one knee shivering. It wasn't that I was that nervous, but just shivering. I figured I was in pretty good shape because I had gotten her a couple of gifts along the way. She had come up from where she was living in North Carolina, and I had given her shoes as a Christmas present right before. So, I had a nice ring, but Diana even helped me to know, hey, what's best friend wanting a ring and all here. But at the same time, get the shoes, so, hey, how bad can this go? But, and I got down on one knee and all. And then I will say it was funny. I asked, hey, do you want to stay here for a little bit, take some pictures? She's like, no, get back in the car. It's freezing. It was a cold day. I think it was literally snow on the ground, all of that. But, again, the cultural marriage proposal process has changed, and I don't think that was a typical Jewish process there. It was a typical asking someone to be the kinsman redeemer process there. But I also love the heart shown in Boaz's response. Again, it was God first for both Boaz and Ruth. And I love how Pastor Kurt Skelly, that I often quote, I love what he said about this. The husband who loves God first loves his wife best. The husband who puts God first, loves his wife best. I think we could say the parent who loves God first loves their child best. The friend who loves God first loves their friend best. Let's choose to wait patiently on God's plan. Let's choose to follow God's plan. Let's go a little farther here. Choosing to wait requires us to remember that God is in charge. We talked about that some, but it's not Boaz that's ultimately in charge. It's not Ruth. It's not the process. It's not this other guy. God's ultimately in charge. Verse 14, and she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another. And again, anybody that would read something inappropriate there, this is on top of a hill, in public, in the open. Again, nothing inappropriate there. Again, culturally strange. But he said, let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. Also, he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her, and she went into the city. I imagine he would have given her more if she could have easily carried it. And I've seen one estimate that this might have been 2 weeks or so of food. So even if he doesn't get to marry her, he's going to be willing to help, willing to provide. Just an awesome thing. Verse 16, and she came to her mother-in-law. She said, who art thou, my daughter? It's a weird way of saying, hey, hi, how'd it go? And she told her all the man had done to her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me. For he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. Then she said, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. Naomi says, hey, Ruth, sit still. Do you think that might have been the hardest time in this whole chapter for Ruth to wait? I hate sitting at red lights and having nothing to do. I can sit in a doctor's office. I can sit anywhere having a long wait if I can work on a devotional on my phone and then maybe play a stupid game on my phone. Or if I can get up and get some steps in walking around. I love actively waiting. I hate having nothing to do and sitting still. You guys see me preach. I don't stand still. I don't sit still. I am not still very often. That would be hard for me. I am moving around pretty constantly. If I talk on the phone, I still gesture. And I'm not talking FaceTime or Skype. If I'm speaking on the phone, I am still gesturing like a wild man. I don't know. I can't be still very often. So I imagine that, hey, relax, sit still. I imagine that might have been the hardest part. But Psalm 37:5 reminds us, commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So when we're sitting still, when we're just waiting, it's not waiting without hope. It's waiting to see what God will do. Maybe a more familiar passage is Proverbs 3:5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. So even when it's time to just choose to be still and wait, we can be still and wait, knowing that God is the one who's in charge. We need to be willing to trust God. That requires us to be flexible sometimes. So let me just ask you, can God change your plans without you getting upset? Without you giving up? Without you fighting back? How teachable are you? Sometimes we look at basketball players or any sport you could think of. How coachable are they? There are some much more talented athletes that haven't made it to the pros or haven't gone very far. There are no doubt professional athletes, Division I athletes in college that are riding the bench because they're not coachable. They can't be worked with. They're not developing because they're not teachable, not coachable. And then there are some that, they're working their tail off. They're doing everything their coach says. They're developing. They're looking to grow. Are you willing to be teachable, be coachable from God, to be shapeable? Just since we're talking our love story here, everybody say, aw. Jen's nervous. I got one. Thank you, Miss Shirley. I appreciate that. The rest of you don't like me. I don't know. Anyway, no, it's all good. The rest of you don't like talking in church. That's fine. No, but my first wedding band, I picked it out, and I again, we're in the jewelry store together. I went cheap, just a simple ring. It was very bendable, very flexible. It was before long, shaped like a football. That was not good. I think a store tried to, get it back in shape a little bit. But then I think I picked out another one. And then Jen got sick of the fact that I had bent the first one, lost the second one. I lost it once and on a teen activity in Virginia with a metal detector. We found it. And then I lost it again. It's still there in Virginia somewhere. Jen bought this one. It's the right size. It's a stronger metal. I don't remember which one, but it's not very flexible. That can be good in a ring, but not good in us. If you were to try to bend this ring, you'd probably break it. I hope we won't ever be that way to God. I hope he can bend us without having to break us. I hope he can shape us. Ruth, again, was now committed to receiving a kinsman redeemer, whether she wanted to or not. And faith is often tested and built when we're going to be in trouble unless God comes through. When all we can do is wait, we can wait biblically. We can trust God. In just a moment, we're going to sing, kind of to wrap up the message and do a little bit more singing, and then we'll take some prayer time and all. But we're going to sing the song, His Glory and Our Good, Brother Rich's favorite, one of his favorites anyway, one of mine as well. But I hope during that, it'll be a song that's really a prayer, if you're willing to kind of treat it as that, committing to waiting on God this week and beyond, so that we won't miss out on anything God has planned for us. We really do leave Ruth and Boaz on a bit of a cliffhanger. The uncertainty, I can only imagine. But I think they were trusting, and we can trust that God's got His glory and our good in mind. I think they were able to maybe even rest, have that peace, because they knew God was in charge. Hey, really, if you're willing, as we sing this song, join in and sing and make it a prayer to God, committing to waiting on His best for this week, His best for every situation, maybe His best for each thing you'll want to pray about in just a little bit.